True, terrifying stories from the wilderness. This is The Vanishing Hiker. It's about two friends who went hiking in Colorado. Now, these guys have been hiking this trail for years, and they know it like the back of their hands. So they're on the trail. They're chatting away, having a good time, enjoying the beautiful scenery around them. And after about 45 minutes of hiking, they come to a little creek that they have to cross. Now, there's a log that goes across the creek, but it's kind of rotten, and it's not really safe, but they need to get across. So our hiker here decides to take off his backpack and shoes and socks and just wade across the creek to get to the other side. His friend, on the other hand, he's not really feeling that. He's got a good pair of hiking boots on, and he's got his backpack on, and he just decides to hop on the log and hopes for the best. As he's crossing the log, it breaks and he falls in the water. Well, this guy who's in the water, he looks up and yells at his friend to hurry up and help him out because this water is freezing cold. But his friend, instead of helping him out, decides to start taking pictures. Pictures of what? I don't know. Maybe of the log that broke. Maybe of the guy freaking out in the water. Who knows? But he starts snapping picture after picture of this guy struggling to get himself upright in this freezing cold water. Finally, the guy gets out and he's furious at his friend. He's soaking wet. He's shivering uncontrollably, and he's absolutely furious at his friend for taking pictures instead of helping him out. Finally, he calms down, and they decide to continue on the hike. They get to a little clearing, and they decide to set up camp for the night. And they do this about 10 miles into the hike. They get everything set up, and then they decide to go check out the area a little bit, just to see if there's anything interesting around. Maybe some cool rocks or crystals or something like that. They go off into the trees. They about 200 yards into the trees when they hear some rustling in the bushes, and they start to investigate. So our hiker here, he's telling his story. Says there was no tracks in the dirt, nothing. Then all of a sudden, he turned around to his friend, and his friend was gone. No tracks in the dirt, no sound, nothing. He just vanished. This guy is absolutely beside himself. He starts running around, yelling for his friend, trying to find him, but he can't find him anywhere. He runs back to the clearing where they had set up their campsite, and their stuff is still there. But his friend is nowhere to be found. He starts freaking out. He doesn't know what to do. He calls 911, but there's no cell service in this part of the woods. He spends the night there in the cold, not knowing where his friend went, what happened to him, if he'll ever see him again. In the morning, search and rescue teams come and they try to look for this guy, but they can't find any sign of him. The only thing that they find is this hiking boot that happens to be size 13. And the weird thing is, the guy that they were looking for only wears size 10 shoes. Who was that guy? Where did he go? What happened to him? Now, there are a lot of theories online. A lot of people say that maybe this guy made up this entire story. Maybe he was lying to cover up the fact that he murdered his friend, or they were fighting and he accidentally fell in the water and hit his head, and that caused him to lose his memory. But the thing is, they found the car that these guys had driven out there with 2 sets of footprints leading away from it, but no sign of them anywhere. So I don't know what happened in this situation. What do you think happened to the vanishing hiker? Let me know your thoughts down below. Also, make sure to subscribe for more terrifying true stories. And I'll see you next time. I found this creepy story on Reddit a while back, and I've been meaning to share it with you ever since. It's titled The Bloodstained Dress, and it's from a user. I was looking for an inexpensive wedding dress for my October wedding. My mother and I went to a local thrift store that had a rack of wedding dresses for a really good price. Most were in good condition and looked like they'd never been worn. I found one that was beautiful, an ivory lace long sleeve with a sweetheart neckline. It had little to no flaws and was only slightly used. I tried it on, and it fit like a glove. We purchased the dress and took it home. I had my wedding shower the next day, and I wanted to show my friends the dress I'd purchased. I hung it in the bathroom and went to grab it. My horror. Red stains had bloomed across the dress. I assumed it was tomato or cranberry juice. Perhaps the previous owner had spilled something on it. I shrugged it off and went about my business. That evening, my mom and I took the dress out of the plastic to get a closer look at the stains. They were indeed blood. I was grossed out, but reassured when I saw that they were only on the underskirt. I could easily have them cleaned. I took it to a professional cleaner the next day. When I picked it up, the lady at the counter told me she'd never seen anything like it. The blood wouldn't come out, and she threw in some cryptic comment about it needing to be cleaned with holy water. I laughed it off and took the dress home. My mom and I discussed how we should try to get the stains out, put it in the sink and let the water run over it. As I pulled the dress from the sink, I noticed something odd. On the underside of the skirt there was what looked like a small burn mark. I examined it closely and realized it was a small handprint, almost as if someone had pressed their palm into the fabric and then pulled away quickly, leaving an imprint. I shuddered. How many of you are getting creeped out so far? If you are, you're going to absolutely love this story. I decided to do one last search for the origins of this dress before I gave up and consigned it. I took it to a local seamstress, hoping she knew where the dress had come from. She examined the dress, then told me she didn't know its history. But when she saw the burn mark, she said, "Oh, that's where the tag was. Let's see if we can find its history." She went into a back room and came out with an old computer. "I think I can access the old database," she said. After a few minutes of searching, she looked up. "Do you know the name of the original bride?" I said, "No, ma'am." Well, she said, "This dress was purchased 12 years ago by a young girl named Mary. She came in with her mother. They seemed nice enough. After the purchase, they left, and I never saw them again." Did Mary have a wedding date?" I asked. The seamstress looked back at me. "Yes, she was to be married on October, the same day as your wedding." I got goosebumps. "What was the name of the person she was marrying?" I asked. "Oh, I don't recall, but it wasn't important." "What is important is that dress," she said, leaning in close, "was never returned." I shuddered and thanked the seamstress. I knew then that I would never wear that dress. The thought of some dead girl wearing it on her wedding day and then pressing her bloody palm into the skirt, well, I just couldn't. The dress is being consigned. If anyone wants a beautiful ivory lace long-sleeve wedding dress, it's for sale. And that is the creepy story of the blood-stained dress. Do you believe in ghosts? Let me know in the comments below, because sometimes when I'm watching these videos, I'll hear people say, "Oh yeah, I definitely believe in ghosts now." And I'm thinking, they probably didn't believe in ghosts before the story started. But now they do because it's a scary story podcast. But that's not the case with this story. Because the very first line of the story tells us exactly what we need to know to figure out what's going on. The second paragraph tells us that she found a dress that was only slightly used. Well, that doesn't mean much because obviously a dress can be used a lot. But it still implies that this dress wasn't worn at a wedding. Otherwise, it would have been considerably used. And then the third paragraph is when things start to go terribly wrong. And so if you paid attention to those first two paragraphs, you could probably figure out what happened here. Let me know in the comments what you think happened. And if you want to hear more creepy stories, stay tuned, because I've got plenty more where that came from. Thank you for listening. This is the sound that haunts my nightmares. A family in Massachusetts heard this faint sound every night for months, but they couldn't figure out what it was. It sounded like someone or something was coughing up phlegm. At first they thought it was mice, but when they set up traps, there were no results. They even went as far as hiring an exterminator, but he came back empty-handed. This went on for so long that their young daughter even started crying herself to sleep because she was so scared of whatever was in their walls. That was when the father called the police. He was desperate for answers. He told them about how he and his wife would hear the coughing at night, right around 3 a.m. every morning. Then it would stop. The only other sounds they would hear were the scurrying of mice. So they assumed that whatever was making the noise was only active at night and was scared of the light. When the cops arrived, they saw no signs of forced entry. There were no windows that had been smashed or doors that had been kicked in. And if whoever was making the noise had somehow gotten in without being seen, then why hadn't they left? This made absolutely no sense. But they did find something strange while inspecting the house. One of the officers noticed that the wall in the kid's bedroom was bulging out a little in one spot. It looked like there was some kind of hollow space behind it. And when he tapped on the wall, it sounded like there was a big cavity behind it. The officer radioed for backup and told them to bring a thermal imaging camera. They then taped off the area and brought in a couple of civilians to help. Tried to open up the wall, but that wasn't easy. They ended up having to cut a big hole in it. And when they finally got inside, they found two passageways. One led to the basement, and the other one led to an empty crawl space above the ceiling. The officer who was documenting the crawl space noticed a sleeping bag in the corner, so he grabbed it and pulled it out. Then he noticed some food wrappers and a half-full water bottle in there too. The sleeping bag was ripped, so whoever had made those passageways had used it at some point. but they didn't seem to be there anymore. It's believed that these tunnels were dug by a homeless man named Gary, who has since passed away. He had made several similar structures throughout Massachusetts, except those were inside of highway underpasses. He would make these tunnels and then live inside of them. Apparently, he was also an artist and would draw pictures of faces on the walls. Here's one that he drew. I don't know what it is about this picture, but it creeps me out. But here's the thing. Gary had passed away in 2016, 5 years before the family heard noises in their walls. Plus, when the police searched those tunnels, there was nothing in there except some old drawings and some trash. So, they really don't know who could have possibly been in there. But the most terrifying part is that after they filled up the holes and went home, the family still hears the coughing at night. It's almost like something doesn't want them to forget. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Or if you want to see another one of mine, just click on one of the 2 videos on screen now. Thanks for watching. Welcome to my channel, where OP rents out a room to a creepy dude and finds out why. Our next Reddit post is from someone who is now known as Throwaway 923. I am a young woman in college and I've got a spare room in my apartment that I've been trying to rent out for months with no luck. It's not the best part of town, but it's also not terrible. My roommate is great. She has a boyfriend who stays over every other night or so and a generally busy schedule, so our apartment is pretty much just me and the occasional guest. But since we have 2 incomes, we can afford to drop the rent by a couple $100s. Still, no one wanted to move in. I decided to try Craigslist, which is popular where I live. Within 2 days, I had an email from a guy in his mid-40s. He seemed nice enough and was definitely weird in a lot of ways. For example, he asked if I had any pets, because apparently he's highly allergic, but he could take allergy medicine. I don't have any pets, I replied back and set up a time to meet. He came by and seemed to like the place. We talked for about an hour, and then he said that he would take the room. Fast forward a few weeks and I've gotten to know this guy a bit. It's a little strange, but he pays rent on time and keeps things clean. The only thing that bothers me is that he never comes out of his room unless it's to use the bathroom or go to work. He does work nights though, so that makes sense. One day I came home early from class to find a ladder leaning against my closet door. I asked my roommate about it, and she said she didn't see anything. I shrugged it off and went to my room. Since then, I've noticed that he'd come out of his room while I was in mine, quickly grab something from my closet, and then run back into his room. One night I couldn't sleep, so I got up to read in my closet. As I was grabbing some books, I noticed something strange behind the shelf. I pushed the shelf aside and found a crawling space. I checked if the connecting door was locked from the other side, but it wasn't. I crawled through and found myself in his room. I screamed and he bolted upright in bed. I immediately ran out of there, completely freaked out. I told my roommate what I found, and she was very supportive. We decided to confront him. My roommate knocked on his door, and when he opened it, she could see shelves lining his room, almost floor to ceiling. They were filled with nothing but pictures of me. Some were selfies I posted on social media. Others were screenshots taken from my public Instagram stories. There were even pictures of me from the apartment's security cameras, and some were photos taken of me while I was sleeping in my bed. The worst part was that he was taking pictures of my roommate too. Looked like he'd done this at least a dozen times. Some of the photos were clearly taken just as she was waking up. I don't want to imagine how he got these pictures. I am 100% sure that he took some of these when I was unfully asleep and I was laying in my bed awake. Both of us confronted him, and he started apologizing profusely. He said that he meant no harm, that he just liked to collect things and he likes collecting pretty girls. Yeah, that's what I thought. I told him that he needed to get out, and he actually tried to bargain with me, offering to pay extra if I let him stay. I told him to get the hell out. He moved out the next day and he deleted all the pictures. My roommate and I changed the locks and we're looking into installing a security system. I'm still creeped out, but at least we're safe. I'm glad you found the hidden door and saw what this guy was doing. Otherwise, who knows what he might have done. Also, I hope you and your roommate press charges. This guy's clearly a pervert and op. You said yourself that you were sure he took some of those pics when you were unfully asleep. That's a federal crime right there. Stalking, voyeurism, burglary, all of those apply here. I hope this guy is put away for a long time. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this content, check out my podcast where I publish the exact same episodes. Also hit that subscribe button because I put out new videos every single day, And as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one. A man was jogging through his neighborhood one night when he passed an empty playground. That's when he heard a noise that made him stop dead in his tracks. What he saw at the playground was both creepy and magical. Do you want to hear this scary story? Then stay tuned till the end. It was a dark night in Ohio. The sky was filled with clouds, which made it almost impossible to see the stars. A cool breeze was blowing, which made the trees in the park sway from side to side. It was the kind of night where most people would be tucked away in their beds, fast asleep. But not 38-year-old Paul. He was out for a nightcap. Paul was a jogger. Every night he would run through the streets of his town. It was his way of relieving work stress, and the solitude of the night gave him peace. He ran past houses with dark windows and empty streets. The night was silent, except for the sound of his footsteps and his own breathing. It was during these night runs that Paul discovered a new part of town, turned a corner and found himself in front of an old park. It was a big park with lots of trees, a pond, and a playground. The park was empty, but that didn't bother Paul. He had become accustomed to seeing no one on his nightly runs, so he continued on his way. But after a few minutes, he heard something that made him stop. He turned around and went back to the playground. When he got closer, he heard it again. It was a faint giggling sound, like that of a child. Paul stood there listening. The giggles grew louder. They seemed to be coming from the swings. He walked towards the swings, and that's when he saw it. The swings were moving by themselves. They were going back and forth very slowly, but they were definitely moving. Paul stood there watching in amazement. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The chains of the swings were moving by themselves. As he watched, the swings suddenly stopped. Then he heard it again, the giggles. They were coming from right behind him. Paul turned around and saw a little girl standing there. She was wearing a long white dress, and her hair was covering her face. Paul couldn't see her face, but he could hear her giggles. "Who are you?" Paul asked. The girl didn't answer. She just kept giggling. Then she turned and ran away. Paul chased after her, but she was too quick for him. He could hear her giggles echoing through the park. Paul ran after her, not knowing where he was going. Suddenly, she stopped and turned around. Paul skidded to a halt in front of her. He could finally see her face. It was pale and her eyes were wide. "Who are you?" Paul asked again. The girl didn't answer. Instead, she pointed to the swings. Then she turned and ran off. When Paul looked back at the swings, he saw the girl sitting on one of them. She was swinging slowly back and forth. The chains were moving by themselves. Paul stood there watching her. He didn't know what to do. Suddenly, the girl stopped swinging and turned to him. She had a big smile on her face. Then she disappeared. Paul was left alone in the playground with the moving swings and the sound of children's laughter echoing through the park. He ran as fast as he could away from the park. He didn't look back once. To this day, Paul still runs every night. But he never goes near the park. He doesn't want to see the swings moving by themselves again. He doesn't want to hear the giggles of the little girl in the white dress. Some say the girl in the white dress is the spirit of a little girl who died in the park many years ago. They say she haunts the park, and the playground is her favorite place. If you ever see her, don't chase after her. Just run away as fast as you can. Was Paul ever really there? Or was it all just a dream? We may never know. But one thing is for sure. The playground in Ohio is not a place you want to visit at night. Thank you for listening. Please share this story with your friends if you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Welcome to my channel. Today's scary story comes from a viewer. I was driving through Nevada on a long road trip, and I had to stop for gas. There weren't many gas stations along this particular stretch of highway, so when I saw one, I pulled right in. It was one of those that you had to go into the store to pay inside, and I was kind of in the middle of nowhere. The only other car in the lot was an old pickup truck. The engine was off and nobody was in it, so I just went about my business, got out of my car, walked into the store, paid for my gas, and got back into my car. That's when I noticed the guy. He was sitting in the bed of that pickup truck, and he was staring at me. It was weird because he didn't look away when I approached my car or when I opened the door. I definitely caught him staring at me. I rolled down my window and I asked him if everything was okay. He just kept staring at me and he didn't say anything. I was getting kind of creeped out at this point, but I figured that he probably just wanted to ask me something, or maybe he was lost or needed directions or something. So I waited. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. He said, "Do you know how to get to Bakersfield?" I rolled up my window and I said, "No, I'm sorry. I just stopped for gas. I don't know the area." As soon as I said that, he stood up in the bed of the truck and he started walking towards me. That's when I locked my doors and hit the gas. I sped out of there as fast as I could. I don't know if it was because of the adrenaline or what, but I could have sworn that I saw him smile as I drove past him. I didn't stop, and I didn't look back. I just kept driving until I came across another gas station. I wasn't going to stop again and risk him following me and getting into my car. When I finally got to a place where I felt safe, I looked back at the rearview mirror just to see if I had imagined the whole thing. And that's when I saw him. He was in my back seat smiling at me. I slammed my foot down on the brake and I turned the car around. I started driving back to the last gas station. I had to tell somebody that I had a crazy stalker in my car or something. So I turned the car around. I could have sworn that I saw him disappear into the back seat of my car. I made it to the last gas station and I parked my car and ran inside. I told the clerk that I needed to use the phone and I called the police. While I was waiting for the police to arrive, I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see him walk out from behind me, but he never did show up. When the police got there, I told them about the guy and about how he was in the back seat of my car. They took my statement and they said that they would look into it. But I never heard anything more about it. I've always wondered if that guy was in the back seat of my car the whole time. Maybe he got in my car when I was pumping my gas and he was hiding in the back seat. Or maybe he wasn't real at all. Maybe he was a figment of my imagination, a manifestation of some sort of deep psychological fear that I have of strangers. I honestly don't know. All I do know is that when I'm telling this story, people tend to think that it's not that big of a deal. And maybe it's because I didn't end up getting hurt. But I can't help but feel like something isn't right about this situation. It's just the idea that there's somebody out there who was willing to follow me home, who was willing to hide in the backseat of my car, who was willing to stalk me. I mean, what were his intentions? What was he trying to do? And why did he smile at me? Was it supposed to be friendly? Was it a predatory smile? I don't know. The not blinking part freaks me out. Human beings blink. It's an involuntary action. And the fact that he didn't blink, it feels wrong. It feels very wrong. Hey, don't forget to share your scary story. And thanks for watching. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is quite an interesting one. It will make you laugh. The suburban doppelganger. A man from Texas was confused when his neighbor kept waving at him. Thought it was because they had finally finished their new deck. They had worked on it every day for the past month. He thought it was odd that they would finish it right before they went on vacation. He and his wife got into their car and drove off to visit her parents. They hadn't seen the neighbors in 2 weeks. They were driving back home when they noticed that their neighbor's car was in the driveway. That was strange, he thought, because they had seen the neighbor mowing the lawn every single day for the past few months. And he had even waved at them from time to time while they were out. They were always outside doing something. But now their car was sitting in the driveway, and they hadn't seen them for 2 weeks. As they got closer, they noticed that the neighbor was sitting on the porch swing, and she was waving at them. The man rolled down the window and shouted, "Hi, there." The neighbor stopped waving and stared at them awkwardly. The man continued, "We just got back. How have you been?" The neighbor seemed surprised that they had been gone for so long. She said, "I don't know you. Why are you talking to me?" The man was completely shocked. He said, "You've got to be kidding me. We've lived here for 14 years and you don't know us. We've been saying hi to each other for months." She replied, "I'm sorry, but I haven't seen you around much, and I don't really talk to people that I don't know." The man said, "Well, we've been gone on vacation for 2 weeks. You didn't see us?" The neighbor said, "No, I haven't. Only saw the gardener. He's been taking care of your yard while you were gone." The man said, "What? What do you mean?" "Your husband has been taking care of our yard," the neighbor said. "Yes, he has. Takes care of it every day." "Do you not know about that?" The man said, "No, he's always outside working on that deck." "I thought it was you." The neighbor said, "No, that was me. My husband has been taking care of your yard every day for the past 3 months." "I don't know what you're talking about, Deck." The man said, "But I thought that was you. I've been waving to you every day." The neighbor said, "That must have been somebody else. I'm sorry." They pulled into their driveway and the man said, "Well, this is awkward. I guess I'll see you later." Neighbor said, "Sure." When they got inside the house, the man told his wife everything that had just happened. She couldn't stop laughing. She said, "Oh, honey, that is so funny. You were talking to the gardener. No wonder he kept waving at you. You probably looked like some kind of animal to him." The man said, "I was getting a little creeped out by the whole thing. I mean, we've never talked to these people before, and suddenly they're waving at us every day. I thought maybe they were trying to tell us something. And then when we came home and they still waved, I was like, okay, this is weird. Then when I realized that it was just the gardener, I felt so embarrassed. I don't think I'll ever live it down," his wife said. "Oh, honey, just forget about it. It was just a funny misunderstanding. At least it made for a good story. So the next time you see your neighbor, be sure to ask them if they've been waving at you. You never know who you might be talking to. Maybe it's just the gardener." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe so you can be the first to see our next video. Motel guests are used to seeing all sorts of things. Some motels cater to truckers and some are frequented by people who are just passing through. But no matter what kind of motel you stay at, there's always one thing in common: the other guests. You never know what kind of person you'll end up bunking next to or across from, which is why it can be so surprising when you find a room that's completely empty. That is exactly what happened to one traveler who decided to book a room for the night. But he didn't realize what he'd soon find out, until he got back from a long day of driving. We don't know the name of our would-be hero, but we do know he was desperate for a shower after a long drive down south. He pulled into the dingy-looking motel, paid for a room with his card, and got in his room. It was dirty and smelled like chlorine. The bed sheets were stained and the bathroom tiles were crumbling, but he was too exhausted to care. All he wanted to do was get cleaned up and sleep before hitting the road again the next day. Started running himself a bath, but the water wouldn't stop running, and when he turned around, he saw that the tub was filling up at an alarming rate. Before he could turn the water off, the entire room began to flood. Desperate to save his things, he grabbed his suitcase and ran out of the room, slamming the door behind him. But when he turned around to find the front desk, he realized there was a strange sight that made his blood run cold. There was a door down the hall that had been locked ever since he'd gotten there, but now it was open. He didn't think much of it at first. Maybe someone had finally come to fix it. But then he saw something that made him question everything. When he peered through the keyhole, he saw what looked like a pale, lifeless eye staring back at him. Although our hero didn't explicitly say what the eye looked like, he did mention that it was a sickly white color. Given how old and decrepit the motel looked, it's likely that this was the eye of a corpse. Naturally, he called the police to tell them what he'd seen, but they weren't all that receptive to his story. They told him that it was probably just a prank and hung up on him. So he decided to take matters into his own hands. After calling a few friends, he was able to get into the room and see what was really going on. And what he found shocked him to his core. There was an eye in the room, but it wasn't human. It belonged to a doll. In fact, the whole room was filled with dolls, each one staring blankly ahead with their soulless eyes. Some were sitting in chairs, while others were strewn about the floor as if they'd been ripped apart and left to rot. The room was dark and dusty, and it seemed as though no one had entered it in years. Our would-be hero must have thought he'd imagined the whole thing, because he never mentioned the doll's room again. But there's one detail that makes us think this story might not be over yet. When he went back to his room after calling the police, he noticed something strange. The water from the flooded bathroom had receded, but the plug was still in the sink. It was as though someone had magically sucked up all the water in the room, leaving not a trace of the disaster behind. And although he didn't mention it at the time, there was a good chance he did, and even noticed the real reason the room was flooded in the first place. See, one of the dolls was missing? And where there should have been a vacant stare, there was now a mischievous grin. Comment if you think this creepypasta is true or not. And remember to subscribe for more creepy doll videos. Hey everyone! A while back, a photo was posted online that showed something really strange going on at a crosswalk in Chicago. You can see all these people waiting to cross the street. But what's strange is that one of them doesn't have a shadow. And if you look closely, you can see that every single person around him has a shadow that stretches across the pavement. But his doesn't. It's as if he's standing in front of a giant black hole. Now, obviously, this raised a lot of questions. How could this be possible? Is this some kind of new photo editing trick? Or is there a more realistic explanation? Let's start with the obvious. Is this some kind of photographic trick? Well, it doesn't look like it. This isn't the kind of thing you can fake with Photoshop. And the photographer who took the picture, Colin, isn't a comedian. He's a professional nature and wildlife photographer who's published several books. So I think we can rule out the possibility that this is a prank. So let's take a closer look at the photo. First, we know that shadows are formed when an object blocks light from reaching the ground. If there's no light, there's no shadow. So even though this man looks like he's standing in the sunshine just like everyone else, it's possible that he's actually standing in an area of no light at all, maybe right under a building or something. But that seems unlikely because not only would it cast his shadow, but it would also block the light from reaching everyone in front of him, which would mean that they wouldn't have shadows either. Another possibility is that the man somehow moved after the photo was taken. But again, this seems very unlikely because if he moved just a few inches, it wouldn't eliminate his shadow entirely. It would just stretch and warp it in a way that wouldn't go unnoticed. Plus, all the people around him would also need to move exactly 3 inches forward to make this work, which is very unlikely to happen by pure chance. Another possibility is that the man is wearing something reflective, like a mirrored jacket or sunglasses, which would, instead of blocking light, reflect it back into our eyes. In fact, this is how a lot of modern bike helmets work. They're designed with a layer of reflective material, so that drivers can spot them more easily at night. So it's definitely possible that this guy is wearing something similar. But again, it seems unlikely that this would completely eliminate his shadow without also changing the shadows of the people around him. And finally, we come to the most obvious and boring explanation of all, which is that the man in the picture is simply standing in the shade of the person in front of him. But that raises another question. Why isn't the person in front of him blocking the light of the people behind him? If you look closely, you can see that they are, in fact, all standing in the shade of the building. It's just that this one man has wandered outside of it momentarily. So there you have it. The reason why this man has no shadow is pretty boring, but it's also the best explanation for what we see in the picture. Of course, there are always people out there who will claim that this is some kind of government cover-up or a sign of the apocalypse or whatever. But in reality, it's just a guy standing in the shade. So thanks for watching. If you like this video, hit subscribe so you don't miss any more. Welcome to our channel, where we try to make you laugh a little harder and cry a little less. Here are some scary stories from around the world that will make your blood run cold. The wrong voice. It was 3 a.m. and 8-month-old baby Sophie was stirring in her bassinet. Her parents, Tom and Sarah, were fast asleep in the room next door. Suddenly, they heard Sophie start babbling into her monitor. Guys, I think it's time for a bottle," she gurgled. The sound of their baby talking sent the two into a panic. Was this normal? Was Sophie trying to tell them something? They knew that their daughter wasn't talking yet. Had she just spoken? Hush. Sarah got out of bed and went over to the monitor to investigate. Tom stayed behind, pulling the covers over his head like an ostrich. Just as Sarah got to the monitor, she heard a deep man's voice say, "Don't worry, I've got her." Sarah froze. Who was that? Where was Sophie? She turned around slowly and started to look around the room for the source of the voice. She couldn't see anyone. She called out for Tom. He came rushing over to the monitor and listened intently. The two looked at each other in disbelief. They couldn't hear anything. Sarah picked up the monitor and pressed the talk button. "Hello? Is anyone there?" No reply. She tried again. "Can you please tell me where my baby is?" Still nothing. Sarah and Tom started to freak out. They searched the entire room but couldn't find their baby anywhere. Tom ran to the window and checked outside. The baby was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, they heard a noise coming from the closet. Tom slowly opened the door and turned on the light. Inside was a pile of dirty laundry. Sarah reached in and pulled out a pair of socks, holding them up like a boxer. "I'm gonna knock this laundry basket," she said. But before she could, they heard another voice. This time it sounded like Sophie. "Daddy, I want a bottle." Tom and Sarah looked at each other in disbelief. Their baby was inside the closet. Tom carefully opened the door and leaned in to check. There was no one there. Then he saw something strange. The baby monitor had fallen off the dresser and landed in the closet, and now it was making a noise like a baby. Tom and Sarah didn't know how it had happened or why, but they were just thankful that their baby was safe. After that day, Sarah and Tom never used the baby monitor again. They were too scared. They didn't want to hear that deep voice again. Sometimes at night when the wind blows through the house, they can still hear what sounds like a man's voice whispering, "I've got her." Lonely Tower. A young woman named Emma was traveling the world, looking for love in all the wrong places. She had just arrived in a new city and was checking into her hotel when she met a handsome stranger. His name was David, and he was everything that Emma had ever dreamed of in a man. They spent the whole evening talking and laughing together, and Emma could not help but feel like she had known him forever. As the night wore on, David started to tell Emma about his favorite place in the city, a lonely tower that overlooked the river. He said that it was the perfect spot for a date, and that they should go there the next day. Emma was a little nervous, but she agreed. She had a feeling that this tower was going to be the place where she finally found the love that she had been searching for. The next day, Emma and David met up and headed to the tower. As they climbed the stairs to the top, Emma's heart raced. She could feel the love between her and David growing stronger with every step. When they finally reached the top of the tower, they were met with a breathtaking view of the city. Emma felt like this was the perfect moment and that David was the perfect man. She couldn't wait to tell him how she felt. But then something strange happened. David suddenly stopped and turned to Emma. His face was contorted in rage and he was growling like a wild animal. Emma was terrified. She had never seen this side of David before and she didn't know what to do. David lunged at Emma and she screamed. Luckily, a passerby heard her scream and called the police. When they arrived, they found David standing over Emma's body. He was covered in blood and he looked like a man possessed. The police arrested David and took him away. Emma was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. She had been stabbed multiple times and there was no hope of saving her. As Emma lay dying, she thought about how she had met such a wonderful man who had turned out to be a monster. She wondered if she had been too trusting, and if she had made a mistake by going to the tower with him. But in the end, she knew that she would never have guessed that the man she had fallen in love with was capable of such violence. And she died believing that she had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Please subscribe and leave a like for more scary stories. The frozen phone call. A woman's cell phone rang at midnight. She groggily reached over to grab it, half asleep, her eyes struggling to open as she searched for the phone in the dark. It was her mom. Caller ID flashed mom, but it couldn't be. Her mom had passed away 3 years ago. Confused, she still answered the phone. On the other end was a woman sobbing, "Help me, please help me." The woman on the phone was clearly distressed. "Hello? Who is this?" The sobbing continued on the other end. The woman hung up, assuming it was some kind of prank call or perhaps a telemarketer who had gotten her number from a data leak. She decided not to worry about it and went back to sleep. But an hour later, the phone rang again, and when she looked at the screen, it flashed. "Mom." Hesitantly, she picked up the phone. "Hello?"
Yes.
This time, she could hear her mom's voice, weak and fading in and out like a bad connection. "I need your help," her mom whispered urgently. "What is it?"
Where are you?
Her mom didn't answer. All she heard was a faint, "Help me."
No.
Then the line went dead. She tried calling back, but the call didn't go through. Puzzled and frightened by the eerie phone call, she tried to shake it off, but sleep wouldn't come. She tossed and turned in bed, the events of the previous hour playing in her mind like a bad dream. Just when she thought she might be able to doze off, the phone rang again. She almost jumped out of bed, her heart pounding. Looking at the screen, her blood ran cold. It was her mom again. With trembling hands, she answered. All she heard was heavy breathing on the other end. Then a raspy voice whispered, "Let me in." Her blood-curdling scream echoed in the silent room. She dropped the phone, scrambling backward, hitting the wall behind her. Her thoughts raced. Was this a prank? Had her mom really called 3 times in a row? The phone slipped from her numb fingers and onto the floor, the screen flashing mom one last time before the battery died. She stared at the darkened screen, fear paralyzing her. As the minutes ticked by, she wrestled with her fear, trying to convince herself it was all in her head, just a figment of her sleep-deprived imagination. But then the phone lit up again, the caller ID flashing her mom's name one last time. She stared at the phone, her heart hammering against her ribs. Should she answer? What if it was her mom needing help? Or was it something more sinister? Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to pick up the phone. But as she brought it to her ear, the screen went dark and the phone went dead. Her mom's face swam before her eyes. The memory of her loving smile and gentle touch, a stark contrast to the fear that gripped her now. With shaking hands, she dialed 911. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "I think someone is trying to break into my house." As the operator calmly asked her questions, she listened, nodding even though the operator couldn't see her. She agreed to stay on the line until help arrived. In what felt like an eternity, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Relief washed over her as the red and blue lights flashed through her window, chasing away the darkness and fear that had enveloped her small room. But when the officers entered, they found nothing out of the ordinary. No signs of forced entry, no intruders. Left with more questions than answers, she thanked the police and watched them leave. But as the door closed behind them, she noticed something. On the floor where the phone had been lay a single white rose, its petals unfurling like a cryptic message in the morning light. Its thorns, tiny daggers in the soft carpet, seemed to whisper secrets from beyond the grave. And as she stared at the rose, a chill ran down her spine. Could this be a sign of something sinister? A message from beyond the grave? Or was there a more rational explanation? The sun rose higher, casting its golden light into her room, slowly dispelling the shadows of the night. But the mystery of the rose and the haunting phone calls lingered. With the first light of dawn, she made a decision. She would find out the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. As she stepped out into the world, she knew she wasn't just facing the rising sun. She was confronting the ghosts of her past. The frozen phone call, the chilling whispers, and the ominous rose had woven a chilling tale, and she was determined to unravel it.